Hi, my name is Carrie Clouse, and I am a professor of architecture and landscape architecture at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Today I'm going to be sharing a presentation with you on the topic of hidden landscapes. Through curriculum I have developed for an honors colloquium at my school. The class is a one-credit optional survey course meant for sophomores and juniors, typically non-majors, who are interested in learning more about one facet of a new discipline. Because of this audience, I typically work with students who are admittedly non-experts and as a result lack so many of the preconceived notions that come with extensive design training. In this course, disciplinary blindness is an asset, allowing students to encounter material that is perhaps at odds with disciplinary norms or the canon with fresh and opened eyes. And because the class is small and discussion based, the students have the time and space for lively discourse about the course content. It has been an exciting, stimulating way for someone like me to experiment with new course content as well, and certainly this course has been a vehicle for my own learning. Today I'm hoping to share the structure and organization with you, and then comment on the way in which it has helped me to explore new disciplinary material. But before I begin sharing the course content, I want to make a note of where I am in the world. I live in Amherst, Massachusetts, a rural landscape on the western side of the state in the Connecticut River Valley. Here, as in all places, there are clues left in the landscape of what has come before. There are, quite literally, dinosaur footprints embedded in stone that serve as a testament to former inhabitants of this region. These types of leftover relics help us piece together an impression of other eras or existences. A more common and ubiquitous feature in this landscape are the stone walls that crisscross the landscaped forests outside my front door. These walls offer up physical reminders that sheep were once ubiquitous here. They are remnants of enclosures that were central to the functioning of the wool industry that was once an economic driver for this region. Cotton eventually replaced wool production, and the landscapes that supported this manufacturing industry have gradually waned over time. Today, the walls remain, but they've mostly been filled in by forest canopy. And so, when one encounters a wall while walking in the forest, for instance, it appears as a hidden landscape feature, something left over from the past, and an indication of another type of use for what is now a forested landscape. And the experience of encountering these walls allows one to contemplate the history of this landscape and the ways in which these features may have supported human lives. This kind of reflection is central to the work of my class on hidden landscapes. I ask my students to encounter a landscape feature or phenomenon that is new or different or perhaps barely visible, and then to try to make sense of it through research, interviews, and observation. Many of the features that my students have studied over the years are not actually invisible, but they are tucked away, perhaps only understood by one subset of people, and perhaps not widely understood in the context of landscape architecture education. These are the markers found in everyday spaces, for instance. The types of features that hold meaning for certain groups of people. Usually they're not glorified, but important all the same. Over the years of teaching this class, I have worked with students to pick apart hidden landscapes in an effort to center otherwise marginalized human experiences. Because these landscapes, it turns out, have much to reveal about people's lives and interests and values. As such, they become important indicators of use, of memory, and of shared experience. It is through this course that I have worked with students to intentionally develop or enlarge the types of landscapes that are featured. I propose that this class offers a new model for landscape architecture education, one that centers observation and awareness, that encourages students to look for meaning embedded within everyday landscapes, and that calls on students to highlight the DIY or low-budget design interventions in their own backyards. This type of class is not meant to displace history theory curriculum in my program, but it could be seen as complementary to the more dominant or popular narratives about landscapes that currently make up the canon. With this introduction out of the way, I'd like to share with you some of the hidden landscape features that we have considered in this class and some of the themes that have emerged across landscape features. The course is divided up into several different sections organized by topic. These topics include race or religion, indigenous practices, or environmentalism. Whenever possible, I invite an external champion representing each landscape to attend my class. This enables an expert to introduce the topic and serve as an interviewee for the students. Each landscape is then studied, interviewed, and mapped or drawn. We also frame this inquiry with theory, beginning with Matthew Gandy's articulation of unintentional landscapes, looking at Gilles Clement's third landscapes, and de Sola Morales Rubio's conceptualization of terrain vague. The students select a single case study to investigate, and then they read about that particular landscape phenomenon in detail, becoming experts themselves. I have a few examples to share with you about the types of landscapes we look at in this course. This one is called Nation of Walls. In our segment on race, we've looked at the topic of the segregation marker walls that were used in the middle of the 20th century in the US. Our champion here is Chat Travieso, the designer who has documented and photographed remnants of these walls across the US. This is an example of one of those walls. You can see that it is hardly an invisible landscape, but it does appear to be hidden in plain sight. Without any understanding of how these walls marked segregation boundaries within new developments, one might understand them only to be a curb or a retaining wall. Instead, these walls emerge as having inordinate power over housing values by demarcating white and black land ownership in new housing developments throughout the U.S. They embody a form of physical redlining, and that they remain today within public or semi-public spaces in the U.S. is an astonishing physical example of the country's long history of racial discrimination. The next example I want to show involves religion, specifically the roof marker lines used by Orthodox Jews. We've invited the champion Piper Birnbaum, a Canadian architectural educator and secular Jew, to share her research and experience with their roof. Through mapping and class visits, my students have been able to learn more about the existence of their roof, which is really a Jewish Sabbath marker that exists throughout North American cities. Then they reflect on the values that underpin this system, particularly in terms of enabling equitable mobility among Jewish populations within those established boundaries. The class also looks at historic accounts of North American wayfinding trees in an effort to better understand indigenous landscape practices. This work is centered by the writing of Timothy Schuler, a landscape architecture journalist. And in this unit, the students are asked to look at historical indigenous landscape practices, with an emphasis on considering how long-standing manipulations of trees can be markers of important sites or routes through the U.S. We discuss the notion of invisibility and how previous land use regimens might not register on contemporary readings of the landscape. Without the benefit of a translator to identify wayfinding trees or point out the import of a particular site, these landscapes might not be understood at all by contemporary landscape architects. At this point in the course, we also look at the ways in which we rely on storytelling and sharing to piece together historic landscape practices. One of the class themes addresses food security and urban foraging through several landscape approaches. We begin with the online open source foraging maps that you see here. These were created by Ethan Lacey, who lives in Switzerland but has zoomed into our class to share his goals for the foraging websites. These are critical tools that are used by foragers to exchange information and resources about landscape features. And the existence of a central repository for foraging worldwide offers a radical new approach for accessing, seeing, and understanding these landscapes, many of which are invisible to the untrained eye. But because this work is not a specific type of landscape, the students also study the work of Black Forager, whose blog not only offers in-depth readings of particular plants within her landscapes, but also a more general commentary on foraging as a form of heritage and cultural or social experience. They studied the work of the guerrilla grafters and then reflect on agroforestry right in Amherst. Finally, the students begin to read the foraging landscapes on our own campus, where they meet with the food forest advocates who are employed by the university. In foregrounding the experience and values that comprise underrepresented landscapes, we are able to more clearly see that those processes, approaches, and interests operate at the margins. By looking to invisible landscapes, we see what is underreported or not dominant. These stories shine a light on actors and groups who might not otherwise be considered in landscape architecture discourse. And the images here are from Samantha Solano, who has come to our class to sort of set the tone and frame the work of landscape architecture as being overly biased or focusing on a particular type of landscape architecture creation. Throughout this course about reading hidden landscapes, students are asked to think critically about what constitutes a landscape with meaning or value. The unearthing of unsung or stories or experiences or histories helps to shape my students' reading of these new landscapes. In this sense, the students move beyond an aesthetic or performative reading of landscape to see value in cultural, social, and religious sites. They are asked to understand spaces from another racial, ethnic, or socioeconomic experience than their own, and they are asked to consider for themselves what actually matters in a landscape. These questions and exercises help them move beyond their initial preconceptions about the discipline of landscape architecture, and hopefully, it gives them some experience in applying research, observation, and storytelling or interviews to the understanding of new material. Thank you so much for your time.